Question. So should I have the original audio muted or I should have the original audio not muted?
Um,
Does anybody know?
when
Ok,
I turn this off.
estamos retransmitiendo. Vamos a empezar en 5 minutos. No, yo creo que empezamos en un minuto más, Caitlin. Ok.
Disculpadme, ¿se oye? ¿Se me oye?
Yes. Muy bien, vamos a empezar. Muy buenos días a todas y
Good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with you today for the presentation in the Americas book, Migratory Flows at the Borders of Our World. I have the pleasure of presenting Caitlin Mary Ward. Caitlin, she's in Washington, D.C., and she's the senior advisor
ecología,
in the Office of Social Justice and Ecologist from the Jesuit Conference of Canada. And Caitlin is part of the coordinating team in Central America of the Jesuit Network for migrants, and she's part of the from the network.
Caitlin, muy buenos días.
Caitlin, good morning, and be welcome. Good morning, I'm presenting here.
la Ciudad de México,
Is speaking from Mexico. He's the coordinator of the Migration Network for Central American, the Caribbean, and from Migration. First, I'm going to make some technical
a través de
aspects. Some people are connecting Zoom and the transmission in the web page. Today's presentation is going to be in English and Spanish. You can see presentation in whatever language you choose. And for those who are in Zoom, you can change the channel to check for the language that you prefer, or actually listening in both languages, whichever you prefer. There's a button in the bottom of your screen that says interpretation, and there you can actually choose the language. Finally,
tener tiempo
we
para
don't know if we have time to answer questions, but
queda tiempo o no,
let's
pero
see if we have some time. But you can leave your comments.
hay otro botón,
There's another
el botón donde dice interpretation, que
at
dice
the other side where it says interpretation, and there you can actually put down questions in the Q&A button. Thank you, Caitlin. Today we're going to present the book, as I was saying, Migratory Flows in the Borders of the World. This is a presentation for America. I have also seen people with us from Europe and other places of the world. So be welcome again, and thank you for being with us. This book is an effort, a collective effort that actually gets us near the challenges and the opportunities that migrant people uh, in the borders of our world. I want to thank Christopher and the people from the Ignatian Solidarity Network for the transmission of this event. It's one of the first events that's done by both the conferences of Jesuit in America. I also want to thank the translation team that's with us and the people who are going to be with us telling us about the reality of the border and the panelists that we have along the intervention. This event is in continuity with the global presentation of the book that we had in Rome in June during migration. We did a presentation of each conference where Jesus Company is presented, and we see the realities of each territory. In the case of America, it's two: the conferences, the Jesuit conferences that got organized, the Canada and the United States and the and therefore, to begin this space, we want for your respective presidents and from other teams and open this space to answering one question. What does it mean? The borders mean as a priority today for the people in your conference? We're going to be looking at it. Presentation to the Americans of the book on migratory flows at the border. The border as a solid priority.
Hello. In 2019, the Jesuit Order developed its Universal Apostolic Preferences, a 2-year discernment which culminated in a mission from Pope Francis, set the apostolic horizons for the Jesuit Order over the next 10 years. Different, say, than a strategic plan or priority setting. The preferences form goalposts, if you were, which should guide every mission and ministry around the world. The 4 preferences are showing the way to God, walking with the excluded, journeying with youth, and caring for our common home. As our Superior General Father Arturo Sosa frequently reminds us, pay as much attention to the verbs as to the object, the nouns. Show the way to God, walk with the excluded, journey with the youth, and care for this planet Earth. Here in the Americas, a clear priority for us has been care of migrants and refugees, which come from and fit that second preference of walking with the excluded. Much of our care of migrants and refugees is rooted in a pastoral letter of the Mexican and the U.S. bishops in 2003 titled Strangers No Longer Together in a Journey of Hope. This pastoral letter helped to break down some of the barriers that exist between countries, inviting us into a more gospel-centered approach to the people of God. In 2003, then Pope, now Saint John Paul II, wrote his Apostolic Constitution, Ecclesia in America, which helped this pastoral letter, in part because what Pope John Paul II reminded us of was stop thinking of North America, Central America, and South America. Rather, think of the Church's mission to one America, a mission rooted in the gospel, one faith, one hope, one people. As we reflect as nations around our care of migrants and refugees, how do we respond to the needs now of those who seek asylum, to those who seek temporary protected status, to those who perhaps have been separated from their families at a border? and those who yearn for a better life. Let us take time to live out this pastoral message, to be guided by these universal apostolic preferences, to bring hope to the stranger among us. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días.
Hello,
Saludos
good morning.
a ustedes de parte de los jesuitas.
To everybody, especially for in
Tres
municipal
generalmente cuando pienso
challenges and from
juzgar la realidad de las personas que se ven forzadas a migrar, sean refugiados o migrantes de cualquier otro tipo, por razones políticas o por persecución o por violencias internas o por situaciones injustas que han vivido en sus países, o simplemente porque son personas que están buscando mejores oportunidades para vivir en otros lugares. Pero también fuera de migrantes y refugiados vienen a mi mente hombres, mujeres, niños, jóvenes, ancianos, campesinos, negros, personas de otros grupos sociales con otras adiciones ideológicas u opciones de vida que se ven marginadas y relegadas a las fronteras de nuestra sociedad, mismo en medio de nuestras grandes ciudades y de las agrupaciones urbanas. Personas que no tienen derechos a la palabra, a la expresión, a los medios de comunicación, pero tampoco al trabajo, a la moralidad digna, a la educación, a la salud, a la participación política. En segundo lugar, vienen a mi mente las fronteras físicas de todos nuestros países latinoamericanos, lugares donde hemos ido desplazando, excluyendo poblaciones secularmente marginadas, indígenas, negros, pobres, campesinos, colonos, víctimas de la violencia y de la injusticia de nuestras ciudades, lugares donde es posible rescatar la humanidad y vivir de una manera nueva con los vecinos, encontrarse con el otro, y no hacer de las divisiones de países, de las divisiones de lenguas o de legislaciones o de monedas o de autoridades motivos de disputa y de discordia y de conflicto, sino todo lo contrario, ocasiones de encuentro, de solidaridad, de amistad, de construir una grande patria latinoamericana. Y en tercer lugar vienen a mí también el desafío o los desafíos de estar presentes como jesuitas en las encrucijadas de la historia donde se deciden o donde se ayudan a decidir junto con muchos otros los destinos de la humanidad en las ciencias, en la política, en el arte, en la religión, en la teología, en la filosofía, en la investigación científica, en las cuestiones de sociedad, en los movimientos sociales. Me parece que esas son fronteras donde estamos llamados a estar presentes con una actitud de fe, en una misión de reconciliación y de justicia. Finalmente, fronteras dice límites, pero dice también posibilidades, dice por lo tanto puentes, y para hacer puentes hemos sido llamados puentes donde la gente pueda dialogar, donde los pueblos puedan encontrarse, donde podamos soñar y construir juntos un futuro mejor para ambos, donde los bienes de la creación, todos los bienes de la creación puedan ser disfrutados por todos y todas los seres humanos. Les envío un saludo especial. Gracias por esta oportunidad de compartir nuestros desafíos apostólicos con ustedes. Contamos con su participación y con su ayuda.
Muchas gracias, Caitlin, y gracias a
Thank you,
Roberto.
Caitlin, so Roberto, for their participation. We can now continue with the presentation of the book. For me, it's very special to present to you panelists because him being a person of a great level, he's a very a good friend of mine. He's from Madrid. Roberto is he's the author, poet, co-editor of the book, and he's leading the platform for the book. from the University Department for Studies of Migration Studies. He is a doctor in international immigration and cooperation to development from the University of Trieste. He's into ethics and from Boston College, and he's got a degree of entrepreneurship and sciences from the University of Valladolid, and he's also studies ecclesiastic studies. He has published 25 books and 65 articles and different instances as a visitor professor for universities from Boston College, Canada University, and from Salvador. Alberto has had the luck of actually walking and learning from various immigrant communities in different parts of from United States to Brazil, from Mexico to Morocco.
Desde El Salvador,
From Spain to India, from Spain to Albania, where we actually shared and he's been responsible for the social area of the Jesus company in Spain and to various services of Jesuits services to migrants in Spain. He collaborates with the conference, Episcopal Conference of
Federación de Religiosos y Religiosas,
and the Conference of Religious People.
apoya
He's president of the migrant
en Estados Unidos.
in the sports DACA in the States. He's the delegate of Europe for Christians
For Marginalized and
he's a member of education. And now he's the director of the University Study Institute for Studies of Immigration of the University and coordinating services in Spain. Alberto,
También eres un gran
I gotta tell
colaborador.
you that you're a great collaborator of the Jesuit migrants in I would ask Alberto to introduce the book to us.
Gracias, Alberto.
The meaning, what the product is. Thank you for being with us. So we're gonna be projecting your presentation. It's my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being counting with me and being able to make this presentation. To begin the presentation, as was indicated on the reports and the borders for Latin America and also United States, and especially for the organization and the Jesuit network for migrants. Just to put it in context and what it contains. Currently, we know there is people, 750 million are external, and then more than 170 million are internal, according to the UN data.
Fronteras se han
The
convertido,
borders have
lo recordaba Roberto Jaramillo, en
as a
espacios porosos.
become very dangerous points, a sign of the times that needs the complexity of
Son
the
agujeros
borders are
por injusticias
just areas where many abuses occur against human rights. The main point of this is looking at the situations that occur in the borders,
que ocurren
comparing the dynamics that occur in these borders and with the correlations to them. The main support to this work is the protectionism that we give people their mobility.
misión, inspirado en la
The process at the guidelines, same investigating and looking at the social transformation. This publication has been with the joint effort of the institutions that Jesus has been looking at. We participate in with justice and the theory of Rome and looking at the results and looking at immigration for the Jesuit network in the Caribbean the Global Network for Immigration, and the social sector of Spain, and the University Institute of Immigration from the UNES University, which has coordinated this.
Los editores del libro son
Editors of the book are Padre Mauricio Diaz, who is going to be with us in the presentation, and Cecilia Estrada and Juan Iglesias, as well as many videos, along with some investigators from other universities in
como
around
Mayo, que
Dr. Andrelarios, who's also going to be in this presentation. Special thanks to Sosa for their support in this, in writing of the book,
Gran Red de JRS,
and also JRS uh, from its foundation being accompanying us, and also I didn't want to forget
la sección migrante
Mother Mayo,
que siempre
who's from and has with us and giving us the support on actually editing the book.
esta publicación y estas
What the
investigaciones
borders does this book cover? Well, you can see in the presentation,
espacios fronterizos
it's 9 borders that worries us
Bueno,
around the world.
tocar las principales recomendaciones.
Touch the main recommendations and proposals presented for this.
Un reto internacional
We
para
know that there's a network for immigration and borders respecting the rights of people and betting on the mobility and function opportunities for the origin countries and the ones that they go to. There's a high human support where people must be this main support, looking at the regulations and borders. That also is important to look at the sovereignty of the countries and the human rights. No state or international organization can look at immigration by itself because of the intrinsic transnational uh, way things in. Because of the caravans that you know on them, it requires a focus that looks at all society and with cooperation with its regional and bilateral. And last, let's the international rights and the defense of the principles of non-aggression.
Algunos de los grupos
In
más
this
vulnerables,
case, some of the vulnerable groups need special attention.
no acompañados y separados,
Children who are not accompanied,
comunidades
and
indígenas,
the indigenous communities to be looked at. Within the investigation, I look at a series of investigations for the group
privado y la
and for the special sector and private sector. These proposals are for the long term. Which are the proposals on the short term? First is humanitarian and emergency resources to countries with conflict. It's looking at migrants and refugees and people who are
las de
been displaced. Uh, let's look at human practices which do not further risk the welfare of people. We guarantee the rights of people and the availability of protecting the right of asylum and other international systems. On medium term proposals is an energetic and clear proposal against the illicit trafficking of immigrants,
sensata,
going against the sensible proposals of caring for human rights and for the construction of the social aspects. Also bring information on the immigration routes so that the immigrants know their transit rights and the offices that they can go to in case of emergency.
también estamos a gestionar las
Also, we are looking at the integrated and coordinated work of border passes, and we need to look for international immigration to actually adjust to the processes and for it not to arbitrary and based on rates. We bring non-prohibitive proposals for the detention as a last resource, and also the proposals at the long term, the creation of international observers of rights recognized by the states and with in, independent to for them to defend the rights of immigrant people. We also need cooperation agreements to cooperate for the safe return, and security of people and their social integration.
Vamos a promover la cooperación internacional.
We're about to the uh, reduce the causes for immigration and also bring integration as a key work and culture and social aspects. We need to look at the immigration as an opportunity for people to grow and maintain themselves. It's necessary to eradicate the forms of racism and discrimination against immigrants and bring a public discourse based on truth to conform the perceptions of the immigration itself.
Solo me queda por último
I just have to thank all the opportunity to look at this segment. We wish to conclude reminding us that working together, offering the best that we can do, all our institutions and social centers, schools, churches, social centers that we have.
acompañar mejor
Can accompany the immigrants and those people who are displaced as well. With this common work, we want to reach further and offering more depth in our service and contributing to the transformation.
ya pensando en los
We're thinking of the next projects that we're going to be working together, and it seems
puede recaer en la
that the
promoción de
focus could come into a
un amigo nuestro,
promotion of a concept
todos conocemos,
as mentioned, is that working together we can
sepa, como decimos,
reach to, as we say in Spain, put on our T-shirt, one that says Manguis, something that we're seeking for. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Alberto. Alberto seguirá con
Alberto.
nosotros en este espacio y en cualquier momento estás invitado también a...
Continue on the space, and you're invited to continue contributing. Thank you for your presentation.
Luego pasaremos también por
also going through the chat and through other
el libro
ways
desde la página de la Universidad
to
de Sevilla.
actually download from the university links.
Gracias, Alberto, por darnos esta visión general de la
Thank you for
situación.
giving us this general vision of displaced people and the process of investigating and writing. Now we want to continue this space, going to the south border of the United States and the north border of Mexico, which join our conferences, and it is a place full of stories. We have Heidi and Cernica. Heidi's going to be speaking to us in English, so we're switching on to English.
Heidi Anternecka is a Maryknoll lay missioner and an immigration attorney working at Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center in El Paso, Texas. Prior to Las Americas, she spent over 20 years working as an advocate with incarcerated women in Latin America. In Brazil, she worked in the trenches, visiting the prisons every day while also sitting on state and federal government councils as a civil society representative of issues related to women in incarceration. She currently works with asylum seekers in El Paso and in Juarez as part of Las Americas' detention team. Every day is a new adventure in learning and managing the devastating effects of the Trump administration's policies affecting those exercising their right to request asylum. Prior to working in Latin America, Heidi was a campus minister at Loyola University Chicago, where she earned both a master's degree in pastoral studies and her law degree. She also taught high school in San Ignacio Belis with the Jesuit International Volunteers from 1987 to 1989. Thank you for joining us, Heidi. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's really an honor to be here. So I'm hoping just to give a little bit of background about the current situation in the in the US-Mexico border. And I think our work, just listening to the introduction and everything before me, just a constant reminder that at least the way I see my work and our work is really that both and mentality, that I'm working every day with individuals as my job as their attorney and trying to grant them the possibility of achieving asylum at the same time as if we don't work on policies, we'll be doing this forever. And so really seeing that sense of how do we do both of those so that we have life in all its fullness. And as Alberto said before me, you know, we can talk about current policies, but what are the situations that are making people flee? If we just keep working at our borders, again, we're going to keep working at our borders forever. And of course, this is this crucial moment in the United States right now. But it shouldn't depend on a specific president, right? Policies should be so much bigger than a specific person in office. They should be policies that guarantee everything that's in our law and in the UN law. So just a little bit of the reality here. What are we seeing? I work with mostly asylum seekers, or I have, although as asylum has become less and less a possibility at our border, we've also expanded who we work with. But they're people that are in immigration detention, in effect in immigration jail, while they're seeking the possibility of getting asylum or seeking the possibility of staying in the US, the country they lived in since they were 3 years old, for example. They're fleeing violence. You don't leave your home, your culture, your family, your language, everything lightly. And they're re-traumatized on their journey to the United States. There's a saying that says women are prepared for not if they're raped, but when. And they're re-traumatized at the border, and they're re-traumatized in detention here. I had a client who was 18 years old who walked with her mother from Honduras. When they ran out the back door as they were coming in the front door to kill her, walked all the way here from Honduras. And I said to her, because I can sleep anywhere, I said to her, Jennifer, I get that you can find places to stay, but what did you eat? Because she said it took 3 months to get here. And she said to me, you know, Heidi, there's always somebody to give you food on the journey. There's always somebody to help you out that way. And I have to admit, my next thought was how shameful that then she gets to this country and the doors, that hospitality doors is slammed shut in her face, right? When I think of the people that I'm representing, and I think how politically motivated this all is, it really is not about what's an appropriate policy, what's the best way to guarantee the protection that we've committed to with the UN Refugee Convention and also our own law. But it's really about politics and political parties. I had a client who arrived with her 17-year-old son. He was 17 and maybe 10 months when they crossed into the US to ask for asylum. And our US government put them in a hotel because he was a minor for 2 months. And then when he turned 18, they moved them into immigration custody so that he could be charged and removed. And I mean, I won't even go into the whole family separation policy, but those are decisions that are made about politics. That has nothing to do with protection, guaranteeing safety, or anything that on paper we've committed to. With COVID-19, there's what's called Title 42 expulsions, where they're literally turning people around at the border, again, without giving them a chance to say, I'm afraid, I'm asking for protection from this country. They're turned around so fast that they're dizzy. And, you know, even if we actually believed that that was a public health concern, we're not doing that at our airports, right? And we're not doing that to people that have the right kind of visa at our border. We're only doing that to people that are brown, people that come from the South, and people that we don't want. And COVID is indiscriminating, right? It has nothing to do with where you come from or what your social status is or what your immigration status is. So again, clearly we know that these are things that are not about humanitarian commitments. MPP, we've talked about remain in Mexico. People have been put in Mexico to wait out their request for asylum, and the border's closed pretty much. The court's closed in April. So we have a client who has 4 children, the youngest, who is a special need child, was stuck in Mexico with no idea when her next hearing will be right now because the border is closed. And in effect, we are just pushing our obligation to care for people and to make sure they're safe into Mexico so that we can say it's not our problem, because it's not happening on our soil. I have 2 clients who have lived here, one since she was 3 and one since he was 7. Again, because our policies haven't been updated and are not adequate to help these people, to help both Ricardo and Elizabeth find a way to live here with their children and their families and their US citizen spouses that is possible for them. Ricardo got arrested because he got in an argument with his stepfather, and he pointed a broken BB gun with no BBs in it at his stepfather. And despite being high school football captain, married to a US citizen, is now in removal proceedings to a country he doesn't know. Elizabeth's been here since she was 3. And you know, when I started representing her, she has 5 kids, was in an abusive relationship, very abusive relationship with a US husband. When I started working with her, she said, I've never been able to get a driver's license, never been able to get a legitimate job, never been able to walk easily with my children in public. And despite all odds, Elizabeth actually won her case to cancel her removal. And when I handed her her ID, her permanent resident, her green card, she just looked at me and she said, I can get a job. Like, I can support my kids with a job that I could actually be proud of. And I ask what we're doing as a nation. I ask what we're doing for those of us who are people of faith, but even people who aren't people of faith. It's about ethics. It's about all of us have an ethic that orients our lives. This isn't the ethic that we want to be about, independent of the country we're standing in, right? I'm watching the clock. So a couple of things I just want to say, a couple more things. The amount of money that we're spending on courts, on detention, on border control, on privatized detention, the amount of money that we're spending fighting what are actually illegal actions in courts is astounding, and how much better we could spend that money to help people and to actually make our world a more just place to live, right? Is very upsetting. There's a judge here in El Paso, actually in Otero, New Mexico, who I've been before a few times, and her rate of granting for asylum in 2020 is 0. She has 100% denial rate. And when I told somebody that, and they said to me, well, doesn't anybody watch that? Shouldn't she get like dinged by someone? And I said, you know, in the current government, she probably gets an award for that. So how would you feel if you're spending 12 months in detention to defend an asylum case going before a judge who has 100% denial rate? Again, that's not who we're supposed to be about as a nation, as a globe, as a church. And so I want to just finish with one more client that I defended recently. She's an indigenous woman from Guatemala who came to the US seeking protection because of some horrible things that had happened to her in Guatemala. And she had bad orientation. She said, when I asked her to describe to me what it meant to be indigenous, she said, among other things, she said, you know, we do things differently. And she said, sometimes we wear shoes where I live. It's very rural. We eat with our hands. I have my very personal clothing that I wear that represents my community. All of those things, she said. And she came to the border and she had somebody who, wait, let me turn my timer off. Okay. She had somebody who gave her bad advice. She crossed the border. with a false name, was sent back to Mexico. And 3 days later, because she still needed protection, she was still unsafe both in Mexico and Guatemala, she came back. And because she had crossed the border once already, she doesn't even qualify for asylum. So we defended her whole case, and she had to have a higher proof to be able to win her safety. And when she won, we actually won her case, not before the 0% grant rate judge. When we won her case, she won something else that says she can't be removed to Guatemala. So our government actually kept her detained for almost 30 days while they tried to find another country that would accept her, because in law, we can deport her to El Salvador or Mexico or somewhere else. We just can't deport her to Mexico. And I thought, this woman who fled violence in her country, who's indigenous, now runs the risk of being deported by our country because we legally say it's okay to El Salvador. And we started a ruckus, and tons of people started writing ICE, and she finally got released from detention. And so I want to close by just saying, like, what can we do? You know, we definitely need people defending people who are coming and asking for protection. We need people supporting people in Mexico while they're waiting to get in. But we need to change policies. And I'm speaking from the US perspective, but globally, we need to change policies. So when we think about what we can all do, it also has to do with being active and demanding from our politicians that we have policies that are humanitarian, that are just, and that make this world safer so people don't have to flee their homes. Thanks.
Muchísimas gracias, Heidi.
Thank you.
Necesitamos cambiar las políticas. Yo
We
esperaba
need to change the policies. I expected that in this life space, we could actually call out the change on
que todavía nos toca esperar al menos unas horas, quizás
states.
sea largo,
But
pero
it seems
quizás
that
ya
yet
estemos a las puertas de una oportunidad de algún cambio en las políticas. Muchas gracias, Heidi, por
be able to announce anything, and we're not gonna. It's gonna be a couple of weeks for the change of policy. Thank you, Heidi, for having been here with us, and it's a pleasure to hear you, and we invite you to continue chatting with us this time. We're gonna be advancing towards the dialogue, the book that we're presented today. In the case of America, it goes deeper into three realities. There are three chapters that look at chapters in America, pieces in America. One is Chile with Peru, also Colombia and Venezuela, and Mexico and the United States. There you'll see chapters. We have the luck of having two of the authors, which we're going to be dialoguing today. I'm going to be introducing the first one, the same as Alberto. I really like that Mauricio Garcia, he's the one responsible that I'm where I am. He's my professor in but I estimate him. I Father Mauricio Garcia Duran. He's a Jesuit.
en ciencia política en la
He's political sciences in Los Andes in Colombia, University of Los Andes,
Universidad
and from the
en estudios de
University, well, and the United Kingdom in the Bradford University. He's been 30 years investigating and accompanying processes in armed conflicts, peace processes, reconciliation, where he is an expert, and human equality.
por la paz, el famoso CIMEP.
From the peace of CIMEC in Colombia, and he's for the refugee. He's working with refugees in Colombia. There's 7 books and 74 articles to the topics that we refer to. He's also been an editor with Alberto, Cecilia, Iglesias, co-authors of the book that we're looking at today, that we're presented today. He's also with the Jesuit for Migrants in Latin America and Peru. And he is from 2015 to 2018. And he's been the regional director for the Jesuit service to refugees.
es un muy
Mauricio,
querido.
as I said before, he's a very good friend. I really thank for him to be with us. We welcome Mauricio to this space. Thank you,
Javier,
Alberto and Javier, for the presentation.
gusto de estar aquí y poder compartir con ustedes.
I would like to be here with you and share with you.
Voy a hacer la presentación del
I'm going to be introducing the second
es un
person.
eh,
He's a good friend. We also have
Alejandra
Alejandro Leo Mendez, priest and assistant professor in the social school. He's in Boston College. His investigation is looking at humanitarian services regarding migration and the forced displacement. He's done an extensive ethnographic investigation throughout the immigration routes in Mexico, analyzing the way that shelters actually look at the processes and
es la intersección de la
the
ayuda
place. He's working with the humanitarian services, immigration, and forced displacement, and regarding human rights, inequality, transit rights, and the so-called industry of immigration. He recently published a part with investigators from Harvard and Tufts University, where he discusses situations of public health and mental health, how the immigrants in Mexico through protocols of protection to immigrants
conocido
or MPT
puesto en marcha por Estados Unidos.
and established as Humane Mexico and established by United States. He's worked with the Jesuit service to refugees, interviewing displaced people, displaced internally in Colombia and in India, and he's also carried out clinical work with immigrant communities in Chicago and Spokane, Washington. He currently analyzes the effects of the MPPs in borders of the US and Mexico. Mendez received his doctorate in
Oxford.
from the Oxford University in 2019. He's got a master's in the immigration studies from the University of Oxford, a master's of theology and social work from Chicago University. He currently is working with the Jesuit Migration Network and is deepening
Población en movilidad humana
incidence of population inequality needs for protection of immigrants and refugees. He's a Jesuit priest from the province of the
Bienvenido.
west coast of the US. Welcome, Alejandro. Mauricio, the idea is to have with you a conversation which is updated in the multiplicity of meanings that the borders have today in Latin America, in the whole American continent, and therefore we want to have this dialogue, and we come with you to speak about the significance of borders in law as we can with the borders that are within the chapters of the book. The border between the United States and Mexico and Colombia and Venezuela are two expressions, total expressions of the most relevant exodus in our continent. The immigration from the Northern Triangle to Mexico and the United States, and of course the immigration from Venezuela. What is the situation of these borders? Mauricio?
La situación en la
Let's see.
frontera
The situation in the border between Colombia and Venezuela is
podría describir como una situación
could describe it as a dramatic situation. A dramatic situation due to the complexity of what is being living in the border.
crisis venezolana
Venezuelan crisis, politically, economically, socially, has taken that at least 5 million Venezuelans have gone out of their country. Out of those 5 million,
hay
in Colombia, there are at least 1,800,000 Venezuelans. The official numbers talked about 1,825,000
eh,
before
entonces,
beginning the pandemic. So you can see that number can actually be greater. There's many who go irregularly into Colombia.
digamos que al menos, ¿no?
Consider that at least 2 million of Venezuelans are in the country.
¿Cuál es la situación? O sea,
What
las
is the situation? The situation,
usados por lo
they
que
are
viven en
expelled
pero
because those who live in Venezuela, but the rights to access and protection that they might have, there's huge gaps in them currently.
de
There
vulnerabilidad.
is a level of vulnerability that is growing, and many of them are in a irregular condition. In the case of Colombia, at least 55 to 60% of the Venezuelans who are in the country have a immigration status which is irregular. That limits their access and the possibilities they have to
Trabajar para poder
continue to work, to access health, education, and to place themselves with conditions in the country.
llamar la atención es que
One element that I want to highlight is that they're subject to the conditions of the armed actors in the borders.
es, es muy fuerte, porque
That's really strong because the border between Venezuela and Colombia is controlled by the armed officers in both countries, but illegal armed actors as well. And both are charging official and illegal are charging immigrants to actually pass from one country to the other. The response, the immigrants must pay in order to pass. And on the other hand, there's the condition of sanitary conditions
el virus
any
del COVID-19 se dé.
in order to stop the expansion of COVID-19 on both sides. And one last element of this dramatic situation in the border is the growing xenophobic feelings and the rejection, which is really strong from side
En la misma
as
Venezuela.
well as within the same Venezuela. The Venezuelan government is declaring
Virus que les está mandando el
virus bombs that the Colombian country is sending to the Venezuelan population. So this is a situation that we want to return. There is a really strong controls. There's a very complicated situations, and that's the reality that
de ello es
one this is the amount of immigrants that go walking and that you see walking in roads in conditions pregnant children
en todas las
immigrants
condiciones
in conditions of handicap and make the situation really being hard.
diría yo
Really, I would say it's a thin synthesis. This is what we're seeing and experimenting.
Alejandro.
Thank you, Mauricio. Alejandro. Thank you. The reality of the Mexican United States border, we must see it from two perspectives. One is the reality of the border of all the passes and cities. And basically, I must highlight that in the last year, it's the people that are just waiting for their process of request of asylum as a refugee, which is the program in Mexico. It's the wait that has been for a about 60,000 to 80,000 people. It's not clear how many people are waiting in the different cities along the border, and the wait is in conditions, in precarious conditions. There's people who are in camps like in Matamoros, which is across in Brownsville. People in the last shelter, the only shelter, or main shelter of the two in Juarez, where we have immigrants, and there's 800 immigrants waiting. But there is another series of immigrant homes, organizations that receive and accompany and have the capacity of receiving immigrants. But these people who request asylum right now have a lot of attention, and there's wish to give them support. But one way, it darkens or leaves you lose sight of not giving so much importance of any other the flows of people in the context of mobility, which have existed before. Talking about the Central American, which continue seeking opportunities towards north, and that their countries, Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, different reasons, lack of opportunities, economy, violence, and this makes reality complex once you reach the border. The Mexicans that are displaced from their own communities from violence due to cartels, but also with generalized violence in the country. And we must not forget the presence of the continuous deportation of Mexicans that go back. There's about 250,000 per year, and that is constant. When we talk about the realities of the Mexican US border, we have these multiple groups of people requesting asylum, immigrants, people in the context of mobility, people seeking opportunities, uh, displaced, and deportees. They present different challenges, different demands, different ways of actually supporting legal support, mental health support, providing basic needs support. Basic is basically is what's also being done in the communities to integrate them, because many of them will decide to stay in Mexico the impossibility of actually crossing or having international protection in the United States. The other way, seeing the United States-Mexico border, we must look at it vertically. It's not only geographical between the United States and Mexico. All these dynamics of people in mobility context exist throughout the migration routes in Mexico, which come from Tapachula in the center of Chiapas, Tabasco, and they get together, and there's also Mexican authorities control, which difficults the movement of the immigration population.
Gracias. Otra pregunta, pues, es el año
Another
2000.
question is 2020, and we cannot avoid speaking about this. This is something that Mauricio has mentioned, something that impacts all of us and affects all parts of life. From March in 2020, from looking at the restriction mobility measures within the coronavirus pandemic, we would think that there is no movement of borders. There's people who say, but what we do, action has stopped. That is, it's true that they tell us, it's true that action has stopped.
Cambiar el orden un poco,
Change
Alejandro.
the order a little bit. Again, yes, it's difficult to say that the action has stopped. Maybe it has gone slower regarding adjusting and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's important to mention that there's different that we can visualize. Responses, no, it hasn't stopped. There's been report of increase of immigrants were obtained by United States Mexican immigrants who cross to US, which means safe. There's a flow in Mexico, and I think that the Central American flow has gone from requesting asylum, but there's other internal movements. When for refugees as a relocation for families from the border in Mexico and the southern border of Guatemala. They have a family relocation program. It's another example of the types of movements that exist even with the pandemic. So I think the pandemic has not stopped. I think it's really difficult to actually stop immigration because immigration has are reinvented, they readapt and the need makes you be patient, but it seek out new opportunities.
Gracias. ¿Y Mauricio, quiere responder?
No.
So basically,
Pretty much
I
completely
con-
agree with
I agree with
Alejandro.
Alejandro.
Just like what happened in
What
the
happens
border in
in
the
the
United
northern
States also
border
happens in the
also
border
happens in
between Colombia
border
and
between
Venezuela.
Colombia and Venezuela.
Pretty much
Immigration hasn't stopped.
migration hasn't stopped at all.
That is
This
clear.
is so true.
There's been some
There's been
changes
some changes,
in the
definitely,
dynamics of the
in
flow
the dynamic of the flow
up
dynamic
to February
until
beginning
February,
of
like
this year.
beginnings of May.
There were people
There were
from Venezuela
Venezuelans
coming
coming into Colombia, and
from
due
the
to the
control
control
measures
measurements
and
and
measures
the quarantines that they
indicated by the
were
pandemic,
established due to the pandemic,
there was a
it
kind of
started
return of
a
Venezuelans
process of returning back
to their country,
home from the Venezuelans.
in part because it was it was difficult
Well,
for them in Colombia.
because
They
they were having a good time in
go out.
Colombia.
They
They couldn't work, they couldn't
earn their life.
earn
And
money or
the
make a
estimate of
living out of
population
it.
of Colombia is
An
that
estimate of
about
Colombians,
100,000,
they
maximum
return
105,000
100 to
Venezuelans went back to
150,000
their country
Venezuelans back to their
between
country
March and September.
between March and September of this current year.
But at least in Colombia there was 1,750,000. So you can see the difference of, of this. And the other thing that happened is that in October and November, the flow is inverted again. And now they begin to enter Venezuelans back into Colombia, even though the border is formally closed because of the pandemic. So the estimate that immigration in Colombia says is that for each Venezuelan that went back to Venezuela, there at least 2 Venezuelans are going to go back into Colombia. And it could be greater. There's some estimate that it could be 3 or 4 Venezuelans that are going to go back to Colombia from those who had returned before. And that we can could see
And we explain this pretty much in a dynamic
dynamics
of
care.
much more attention, which
Every
pretty much
time
every
Venezuela
time we see more Venezuelans in this
last
couple of
weeks
last weeks
because
through
on
the roads
of
in our country. And
and
this is growing.
this
This is something
growing.
definitely that
This is something
stopped
that
in a big
stopped.
measurement. There were some flows that they were going lower, but
And
now they're coming
now
back
there you have
again.
return.
And all of
So
this, definitely, they came back from irregular roads.
To regular condition.
This
So
is
this
the current
is
situation
a
that
condition
we are
that's
currently
been
living
living in
over
the
here
country.
in Colombia. I would pretty much
I would highlight
mention and
something
say that
else
we constitute this in the Jesuit
that we looked at the
service
network,
is that
was on the network.
there are also some internal
There's
displacement in Colombia
also
from
internal
Venezuela.
displacement
During this
in
past
Colombia
pandemic,
of
we had to
Venezuela.
move from
They had
big
to move
cities
from bigger
that they have much more
cities
controls to areas, to
to
smaller areas in the
smaller
country
communities in the country
to
to
find their way of living, to
actually earn their
find
life.
food. We discover that
We
in those
saw that
detentions,
in the
those
processes
processes, that
that the
those walkers were,
walkers
they
were
were
not
not just
only
walkers going back to Venezuela,
going
but
to
they were
Venezuela,
also
they were
walkers that they were
walkers that were
moving
moving
inside
inside
the
Colombia,
country, but Venezuelan migrants, not necessary
but not but Venezuelan, not
Colombians.
the displaced Colombians.
So definitely,
These
these are some of the elements that we just
are the elements that we have
perceive,
been
and
seeing.
well, definitely migration has not
Immigration
stopped at
has
all.
stopped.
It's still
It continues.
continuing, even though it has its
It has
changes,
its changes.
obviously
Thank
due
you,
to
give you
the
a point to him.
COVID-19 issue. Thank you very much, Alejandro. Thank you. I was thinking on two things right now, especially in the amount of stories that there and those numbers that you are currently mentioning that connect me a lot in the testimony that Heidi mentioned at the beginning of our meeting. And I was thinking about that, yeah, we are, this has stopped because the reason hasn't stopped. The reason hasn't stopped. We definitely need to put that on the table. We're gonna do in a current question. We had some sort of resistance, like I was mentioning. We were on the some expectation if we could announce the electoral um, in the United States. But aside from that, it's so truly the transcendency that migration policies definitely have, especially on Central America, but at the same time on other territories in the continent. But I wanted to ask you, Alejandro, what change do we have to request? I'm just thinking on the things that are happening in Mexico,
Situaciones
etc., etc. But those situations that definitely has been anticipated, what do we have to think? What changes do we have to request on the migration policies? And if you want to wet yourself in anything regarding the U.S. election results, the space is all yours. Well, definitely, I do think that we have to start that. Obviously, I'm not an expert in politics. That's definitely something that not I'm strong about as topic, but I don't know. Regarding migration policies, we got two scenarios, right? In case that there will be a change of administration, or if there won't be administration part of the effort that has to be done for migration policy, definitely has to be an increase of the numbers of refugees that can come or be accepted in the country. That's definitely something, and I'm talking about specifically United States of America. In historical levels, it's really clear that the current administration has been restricting, has also been limiting, and more that access to refugees asylum. Even though we know that there's a limit of refugee that can be around 18,000, they are not even accepting 10,000. They're not even there's no process at all. I do believe that's something that has to be we have to working the fact that we have to increase the numbers of people that we accept as refugees in this country, and also definitely we need to facilitate the process. I do believe the policy of waiting in Mexico or Guatemala or in El Salvador or some measurements that have been signed as a third safe country. I definitely think those are some sort of policies that put the peoples in risk for different contexts. So there's a job to be done in that, or at least modify, right? Or at least prevent or offer better conditions or safety conditions for all the people that are in refugee conditions. Now, something different that we have to also talk about is the child protection and women protection. There's been it's quite visible this event mentioning that there's still more than 500,000 kids separated in an early age on the MPP, that the child hasn't been back together with his family. I do believe that there's an effort that has to be made to work and reintegrate these children with their family. And of course, that we've seen some other measurements that they're returning without an opportunity, without requesting asylum. They're also adding minors to different custom borders back to Mexico. They're returning into the whole idea that hey, they're Mexican child. The report that I've heard from all my staff that I collaborate and work on the border is that they pretty much they're returning kids. Doesn't matter the nationality, they're just sending them back to Mexico. I do think that we have to work on there, depending on the scenario. Where we have to expect that if the current administration stays in office, leading the country, what we should basically we have to pretty much the same process. I do believe that a process of migration policy, I will say that with much more cruelty. I do believe that there is a cruelty level in use to create like some sort of parents to avoid other people come and request of a silent figure. It is a way of avoiding the attention, so we punish them so the people don't come. We put those refugees as examples for other Latin American people. I do believe that's something that has to be the current administration stays in office that will continue happening. If there's a change, I still believe that it will change. It will see how this new administration will change, what things will be modifying depending on how the policies has been applying. I do believe that it will take some time, but I'll believe I will feel like a different environment, right? I probably the hope in this case is for those people that are requesting the asylum, a different type of um, hope. Those people that are working on the DACA or TPS or explore different advocacy in this type of scenarios or cases. Thank you very much, Alejandro. One of those measures that Biden was mentioning in the campaign was pretty much that what you were mentioning, regular regularization on people that are currently on the United States. Thank you very much. Mauricio, I would like to come back on what you mentioned. Aside from COVID-19, that definitely has to stop the flows on or still continuing the flows of migration from Venezuelans going to Colombia, but at the same time, Colombians that are coming back to their origin country, which will work more deeply, will make the crisis in a humanitarian crisis deeper. I would like to know what we can expect from the following upcoming months. What are the scenarios in the evolution of the Venezuelan that are you currently explaining to us? No, I just believe that the perspective that we are currently seeing this is going to continue. And like Javier was mentioning a couple of moments ago, is that if the causes are not currently changing, obviously, I mean, this is really hard to change. The Venezuelan situation is really critical, and plus the impact on COVID-19 definitely has been covered by the government. They all consider that the biggest impact that's currently recognized in the quality. There are some factors that are still going to be pressuring that the Venezuelan people move. And we'll see two type of flows. One, it will be a circular flow on the borders. What I mean is those Venezuelans that move to buy stuff and go back to Venezuela. That circular flow definitely had stayed during the pandemic and while closing the borders. We've seen during all this time there was a flow of that we could estimate between 2,000, 4,000 people daily that come and go on the border by irregular roads. Now, the second thing that I want to point out is that there'll be a flow of Venezuelans much more clear now, especially if the borders, if they open the borders again. And that possibility was upcoming in the near month. What do we really expect is that we will see a flow, a bigger flow, and that flow will be a. We have to focus on that and attentioning on the new migrants because most of those new migrants are basically um, they return and also tensions on the workers. that's definitely a new challenge. That's definitely a challenge that we are currently facing as a refugee service. Not only the tension in our internal office, but also tension, and this is what we're plotting. We have to organize some missions to reach thousands of Venezuelan workers that are coming on roads throughout all the country. That's what pretty much we expect, and I do think that in the estimate, officially, we estimate that there could be like around 200,000 Venezuelans coming back. I think those numbers definitely could be for sure double or more, you know. Um, the provisions that we have, the projections that we estimate will be like around 400,000 more Venezuelans coming back to Colombia. Thank you very much, Mauricio. Now we will
Estando hacia
go wrapping up. I will invite Mauricio, Alberto, Heidi. If in the following question do you like to add something, I invite you to. On the perspective that we have, we share, and definitely there's
eh,
some sort of attention, highly attention on the continent where the permanency migration doesn't stop. Migrating, the necessity of migrating doesn't won't stop. The amount of people that need protection or not to those all the agreements, international agreements, the necessity of migration or international protection at the same time, and most of the apportation made by everybody on the table are going through that. We definitely need much more better politics. That's the big tension. It's no different point in the Americas. I think definitely we can refer it to other territories. We've written down some of this idea, but I want to ask Alejandro and Mauricio, but at the same time, we want to invite Heidi and Alberto if they want to join. What should be the principal points on the request of changing migration politics in this type of context that I'm explaining, where the borders are in a true examples, for example, the militarization, border externalization, etc., etc. There are huge evidence of this tension. Alejandro, if you can start. Yes, I definitely believe that it is a question that is quite tough to answer because in the end, the politics operates according to the law, according to the law framework. So the changes in politics definitely, or what we have to look forward is that developed countries definitely need to determine some sort of migration participation on one hand, recognize that and facilitate that movement, facilitate that people can come, can go back, can have some sort of social security, some sort of protection, sort of protection safety. I do believe it's something pointing out that the labor work is available and sometimes much more easier for developed countries than mentioning that we don't need them. Obviously, obligates migrants to do it in irregular channels. But on the other hand, we also have the figure of those who um, have to migrate due to violent scenarios that they are not considered inside the legal framework. I do believe that it's something that we have to follow or at least work on it is how we are going to flexibility or creating a sort of legal figures or a system that can provide international protection and also facilitate access to some sort of levels to people that are don't fulfill those frameworks that are inside international laws. I do believe that we have this needs flexibility and creativity, and also this will require some recognition that the social realities are definitely changing. Thank you very much, Mauricio. Mauricio and Alberto. Well, basically, what I mean is that the two challenges that we currently have in this process, or at least in the Colombian Venezuelan border, has much more to do with the fact that the migrants, the Venezuelan migrants, are not simple migrants. They are forced migrants. They are migrants with protection needs, international protection needs. This is something that the government has or simply don't want to recognize. This the current Colombian by this refugee status definitely is it's something that has to be made. It's something that's so embarrassing. Me as a Colombian, I definitely think that we are talking about a million or like around 2 million Venezuelans, and if we provided like around 100 refugee status in the last 2 3 years, that could be the top number for sure. That's definitely something. That's a reality. That's a critical reality, and definitely has to be a much more clear politics regarding this topic. Second point that I want to point out is that Colombia right now we are working on a migratory politics in the Congress. Well, we know about all the draft or the things that are currently being discussed in the Congress. As we try to participate in some sort of the sector, especially in the parliament, they're not giving an answer. They're not discussing the deep topic in migration issues. For me, one of the main focus that we have not discussed in the country is that there is a true need in regulate the migrants as forced migrant, regulate them with some sort of flexibility, like Alejandro was mentioning. We need true criteria, not just simply saying that because some of the measurements, just to let you know, that Venezuelan or Venezuelan women that comes with a passport with sealed passport can start a process. Hey, to date, take uh, processing a Venezuelan passport, it's impossible, believe me. And obviously, they come. Some of them come without no papers, without anything. Like it's not enough. We definitely need regulation policy, a wide policy that can guarantee that those forced migrants that come to Venezuela to integrate in that Colombian dynamic. One way or another, they could also give their provide something to the Colombian society, right? This has to also provide a right, like some legal rights, like non-developed, like some safety measurements, hospitality measurements. What I mean is to develop some possibilities to be quite nice to Venezuelans. And this pretty much is to all the xenophobic done. Most of the municipal administrations in Colombia, what they did was organize, hire buses, and put the Venezuelans in those buses to send them to the border. That's complete nonsense. But that totally expressed that feeling. And definitely we need to consider some diverse politics, right?
La cuestión que plantea
Unfortunately, the scenario that he's plotting is pretty much not just damaging the current situation. Unfortunately, that's definitely something has to do with a lot of many borders that this book talks about, and like the one that we mentioned over here in Europe specifically. I do believe that one of the elements is to add and to add something complement to. I do believe that the international agreements, for example, the one in 2018, December 2018, we noticed one element that's definitely crucial with this topic, which is pretty much established integrated politics. What do we mean with this? Most of those elements that Alejandro was mentioning, that Mauricio was mentioning, that we talked, has to be done like with most of those countries, most of the regions are authentic. Um, like for example, if you want to put pretty much those laws are just to like put small papers to protect the law. We definitely need in most of our countries, and I could say some most of our regions to have integrated migration politics. What I mean is that integrated has to be like a working scenario. There has to be some regulations, some vulnerability measurement. Unfortunately, what's happening in the borderline, unfortunately, I mean, it's something so painful, but something small be- um, that causes the transit hospitality, like well described by Mauricio and Alejandro right now. Until now, the only thing that we are noticing in the most of the scenarios that pointing out partial um, measurements that are still attached to the political color or the of the countries. But this is definitely not due to xenophobic measurements or prejudgment. Definitely something quite tough to measure, but we all see it that during this COVID-19 scenario, most of our society's measurements have sustained due to the fact of migration communities that have sustained this or health system assisting them or have accomplished to that the food could go to the supermarket or they taking care of our elders, they have taken care of our child, but they haven't go to the outside to clean to basically like they teach, for example. I do believe this is a true important element, so nice to recognize because if no, it will be could we live together like a sociologist one mentioned? Could we in the end would live together? I do believe that we can, but we definitely need to consider it as a real. I don't know, Heidi, you would like to share something?
Sure. I definitely am in agreement with everything I was hearing as I was thinking. I would just affirm that. But what I was thinking is, and I was listening to the question in Spanish, so I apologize if I go sideways, but what we need first is a desire, is the will. Because I feel like um, we need an immigration policy that is up to date so that we don't have individual presidents swinging it in different directions, right? Because if we had a policy, a law, that wouldn't happen. But I think, as Alberto said, it needs to be an umbrella where it's not just how do we treat that immigrant, but what are the budget implications of that? How do we spend our budget differently? How do we look at economics differently so we're not imposing economics on countries that end up causing people to have to choose to flee? But when I was thinking about the whole thing, and we have to have a desire to have hospitality and to welcome and to create a space where we all have a right to life and justice, because right now the desire is the opposite. And if we had a will to really be a country that respects immigration law and refugee law, then we would sit down and say, where are all the places we need to change that? And right now it's the exact opposite. I think it's possible because I believe in the impossible. But I think we have a long way to go to get there in this country and really across our globe.
Thank you, Heidi. Caitlin?
Bueno, una última pregunta.
One last question. It is an open question for all the speakers. We would like to wrap up this space, seeing the future with some sort of clarity, and if possible, with some sort of hope. For you, what are the true challenges and what are the signs of hope we can take out of this migration and border context?
em, Mauricio, ¿quiere empezar?
Bueno, a ver, yo diría el
Well,
gran
I would say that the true challenge over here is to guarantee a welcome or an attention.
y ahí
For me, that's the biggest topic. And there, I just remember the four verbs of Francis, Pope Francis: promote, integrate, protect. Definitely, I do believe that it's definitely a start point that's really important. The true challenge here is to make this a reality. I do believe that this is a challenge to make it real. The hope, hey, hope for me comes in in two ways. The first one, in seeing with my eyes that in the middle of all this conflict, there are some people that help and assist other people. And there's solidarity, significant solidarity expression that truly impact. And this is definitely something that impacts me. And the second point of solidarity is seeing migrants, Venezuelan migrants in Colombia, empowered and protected, that they could be heal those, that they could heal those traumatic, that they could add to Colombia in a positive way, just like we did in years, in past years, in decades, in the Venezuelan context. There was like around more than 1 million Colombians that migrate to Venezuela. So I definitely believe that this is a true hope. Communities that come, and at the same time, communities that migrants that true migrants that are empowered, capable of being an alternative of solutions of an answer, right? Of leaving this current situation that we're facing, right? Yes, I would say that like the challenges, there are two biggest challenges that we're facing right now. The first one has to do with not seeing migration as a problem. That the people move, human mobility is not a problem. We've moved for years and years, centuries, and we will continue moving. The problem comes, and this is a challenge, the way that people move. It could be some violence issues or economical issues or situation that in the origin site that they can't find things that they could grow as a human being. So the challenge definitely is to take this stigma that migration is a problem. The problem here is that to understand what are the circumstances that generate that population move. I definitely think this is a really important topic. The other one has to do with what Mauricio was mentioning, is that the challenge and the community, the reception and destiny could become in hospitality community with all the challenges that all of this comes, meaning that they have to learn how to accept the difference, that they have to learn how to integrate and provide community spaces and share that common space. I definitely think that that's a true challenge, right? And I agree with Mauricio was mentioning. I do think that hope are in those signs that we see in solidarity that presenting from every day. In my work, working humanitarian organization, it's incredible the amount of will that we see in sectors in the society. In that sense, speaking, it's important to mention that they are like, for example, in the Mexican society, that for years and years they've been really solidary with migrants, have to move from that solidarity paradigm to integration, right? What do we do with the people that are staying here? How are we going to integrate them? But that solidarity definitely it brings a lot of hope from there, and it's just to continue collaborating and providing a better life condition for those who look for opportunities right in our countries. Thank you very much. I don't know if someone else would like to answer. Just really quick. Basically, I totally agree with what Mauricio and Alejandro mentioned. For me, this phrase that I was, how are we going to be living together, managing the diversity? How are we going to work every time more plurals, every time we're going to be more diverse, and every time we're going to be some sort of polarized? In the end, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to make this? How do we make this hospitality encounters? How do we make this a real echo? And just like Alejandro was mentioning right now, is that to see migration as an opportunity for me, even though it's a slogan, but if we are all migrants, I don't believe it. Right now, if we all ask over here in the panel, who of your families, or if you had to leave your country, or your grandfathers, or your parents, or go to another town, probably I would be sure that we basically will stay here. On the other hand, the hope, meaning I do believe, I was just thinking about, I live in a very hospitalidad community. I believe some migrants irregular with no document China. And basically, at the beginning of the pandemic, those kids spent a complicated time aside from where we live. Also, the fact that we can't grow in our document process, or they can't go to school, but all of them, especially two of them, because one of them has quite been quite lucky, but they come every single day to the church to share the food for share food with all the COVID crisis. For me, definitely, for me, it's a great sign of faith, seeing how these young children live this reality in a very solidarity and hospitality way. Express it that way, that's just important for me.
I would I would just add, I think the challenges is adding to everything that's been said, is really removing this question from political. I mean, it's what Alejandro said. Can we take it out of either I win or you win? And if you win, I lose, and get into a space where it is about human beings and humanitarian relief and human rights. You know, I think that's for me the biggest challenge, because then we can sit down and have a conversation. And I have to say that the hope is all the solidarity, all the indignation and outrage every time we're speaking to people that aren't at the borders, that don't have direct contact, you know, and tell stories. People are indignant that actually that things like this are happening. And I think all the fearlessness of migrants, of young migrants, of undocumented migrants that are fearless about stepping up to defend what they believe is right and work for change, gives me huge hope.
Bueno, pues
Well, all you guys that know me, I'm a very sensitive person. Definitely, this last intervention has touched my heart completely. I told Alberto that I was gonna write on a blog that, so I'm gonna take this last answers. I have the article all written now with these challenges and this hope signals are definitely the road that we need to manage. On my end, to wrap up, I would like to, we're just 4 minutes for the time because we started 5 minutes after, but once again, thank you for respecting this time frame. I'm just gonna stay with the whole idea that borders are one of the biggest challenge for the organizations and for the defenders that work in the follow-up and integrated follow-up that appear in most of the challenges for migrations. One of those spaces that definitely are offer that provide much more learning. Those signs of hope is that we definitely can learn, and we learn every day from people that we want. Daily, we are witness that move of that movement that internal displacement looking for better future, but also in the borders we see
derechos a las que están sometidas.
the human rights violations that are intolerated. The last couple of years, the borders definitely they're no losing all the positive things. Encounters, learning, hospitality, interchange, growth, hope. I do believe that we need to be aware, we need to keep in mind and request human rights for people that migrate or live in borders. But at the same time, we need to provide and work on building that, growing those authentic values that in borders are existing and have existed forever. So both homework for human rights defense and the reivindication of the border as a space, as a life space, listen and also know the reality, just like we did today, thanks to our four panelists. It's necessary. That is why, and I add this to the book presentation. Don't forget to read this book and share it. It's a way to express this reality. And also, like Alberto was mentioning at the beginning, I coordinate a network. Alberto knows what does this network mean to coordinate in the positive and what's not easy to do. This book definitely it's been a true hope on articulation, just like inside the company or the necessary alliances from civil societies and churches. I do believe that this is a way in which how we can rock this because the cause that we are developing this is, as a matter of fact, in the company of Jesus, that's quite hard. We can do this alone. We can't do this alone, to be honest. I just want to wrap up saying thank you. First of all, to the migration institution on the University of Comillas, Alberto. It's been a true and fantastic leadership in all this process of creating the book. The editors, Mauricio, transferred this to Cecilia, Juan Iglesias as well. I just wanted to thank. We also got three of the authors. The authors because they brought this light from the borderline, or at least they just we could say they transfer us the light that comes from the border and also the shadows that the borders are affecting the human rights of who live there. Thanks from Chris and Kale. Thank you for the church for making this the transmission possible. Also the translator teams. Thank you, Caitlin. Definitely, it's been a true pleasure collaborating with both conference and the migration framework. I do believe it's important, and everybody that has joined today in the Zoom or in the transmission as well. I do believe that these spaces are really important to understand the transcendency that this is in historical framework. Again, thank you for in my end. Just appreciate. I don't know, Caitlin, you want to say something? Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the speakers for your interventions as well. I do believe that everything was very informative. We've learned a lot, and at the same time, we want to thank ISN for sharing this platform and also the translation team. On my point of view in Washington, it's not. I have the U.S. election results. I have it on my top of mind, but in the when I'm obsessed with the current updates that they were produced in my Twitter in the last couple of days, I found a video, migrant video in Matamoros, where they were waiting for because they are in the remaining Mexico politics. They were singing and they were praying for a positive results in the elections. And that video breaks your heart completely, you know, because you know how basically they understand that praying is the only tool that they have. At the same time, have it's quite hard to just think and consider that there's more than 59 million because basically these are just numbers, last night numbers, 69 million people that voted for preserve um, top politics like Spain and Mexico, for example. However, there's also the other side of the coin where 3 million people or more went and voted for to reject those type of politics. But people in the state like Michigan, like that Trump won in 2016, or people in Georgia, for example, that we still don't have those results, but it is a state that we all knew that Trump would win easily, but most of the people went out in big numbers and used their voice, their vote to reject xenophobic and reaffirm their belief. Borders definitely has to be a point of encounter, not of rejection or exclusion. We have a huge road to travel. United States right now it's really polarized, and we have to submit. We will need to submit in a reconciliation process, but we have to remember that there are a lot of good people with their actions and words, and their votes have defended the four verbs that Pope Francis has told us protect, promote, and integrate. Thank you very much. Something else before ending is that we haven't had to answer some questions that I'm seeing right now on the panel. We will try to respond them. And I just really wanted to bring a comment from Likia, our Likia Bolivar, our good friend Likia Bolivar, in reference something that she was pointing out in Mauricio about the Venezuelan walker. How has she been a witness of more than a 100 kilometers road? There hasn't been a single point of intervention. Once again, thank you very much for everyone. Big hug for everyone, and thank you very much.